The cargo ship Liberty's Dream docked at Kepler Station, with a soft thud that echoed through the metal corridors. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off his ship and looked around the busy trading hub. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the station, carrying boxes, talking in strange languages, and conducting business. Jake was a tall man with brown hair and calm blue eyes. He had been flying cargo ships for 10 years, visiting stations like this one all across the galaxy. His crew followed behind him. Lisa Crawford, his pilot, was a short woman with red hair who could fly anything with engines. Danny Rodriguez, the engineer, was a young man from Texas who could fix any machine. Amy Walsh, the medic, was a quiet woman who took care of everyone's health. "Welcome to Kepler Station," said a voice behind them. Jake turned to see a large insect-like alien walking toward them. The creature had green skin, 4 arms, and big black eyes. It wore the uniform of a station administrator. "I am Zixthal," the alien said. "I run this station." "You are the humans from Earth, yes?" "That's right," Jake said. "Captain Jake Morrison. We're here for supplies and trade." Zixthal's antennae twitched nervously. Good. But I must warn you about something. We have a dangerous creature in the lower levels. Very dangerous. You must not go there." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "What kind of creature?" "A shadow maw," Zixthal said. The name made several nearby aliens stop talking and look worried. "From the death world Zerion Prime. It has killed 3 handlers already. Many more are injured. Some have gone mad from fear." Danny whistled low. "Sounds nasty." "It is," said another voice. A large reptilian alien approached them. He had tough scales, yellow eyes, and wore a security uniform. "I am Commander Veltar, head of station security. The beast is locked in our strongest containment cell, but it is still very dangerous." Amy looked concerned. "What happened to the people it hurt?" Veltar's expression grew dark. "The creature has mental powers. It can project fear into your mind. Images of death and terror. Most beings cannot handle it. They run away screaming or fall down unconscious. Some never recover." "Why do you keep it here?" Jake asked. "A wealthy collector hired hunters to capture it," Zixthal explained, "but no one can transport it. Every handler who tries to move it gets attacked mentally. The beast refuses to eat. It may die soon." Jake felt curious about this creature. Throughout his travels, he had seen many dangerous animals, but this one sounded different. "Where did it come from?" "Zerion Prime is a world of monsters," Veltar said. "The whole planet tries to kill everything that lives there. Shadow maws are the top predators. They are huge, fast, and deadly. This one is 12 feet tall with black scales and claws like swords. "And it's dying?" Amy asked. "Yes," Zixthal said sadly. "It has not eaten in 5 days. We try to feed it, but it attacks anyone who comes close. Even our robots get destroyed by its mental powers." Lisa shook her head. "That's terrible." "The creature is a killer," Veltar said firmly. "It belongs on its death world, not here. But the collector paid good money for it, so we must keep it alive if possible." Jake looked around the station. He saw aliens from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like insects, others like reptiles or fish. A few looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra arms. They all seemed afraid when they talked about the shadow maw. "Has anyone tried to understand why it won't eat?" Jake asked. The aliens looked confused. "Understand?" Zixthal repeated. "It is a wild beast. There is nothing to understand. All animals have reasons for their behavior," Jake said. "On Earth, when an animal stops eating, it usually means something is wrong. Maybe it's sick, scared, or sad." Veltar laughed, a harsh sound. "Sad? It is a killing machine, not a pet." "Even killing machines have feelings," Jake said quietly. The security chief's scales changed color slightly. "You humans are strange. You think everything has emotions like you do?" Danny grinned. Jake's always been good with animals. Back on Earth, he had a dog that everyone said was too mean to train. Jake had that dog sitting and shaking hands in a week. "A dog is not a shadow maw," Veltar warned. "This creature would kill you before you could blink." Jake nodded. "Maybe, but I'd still like to see it." "Absolutely not," Zixthal said quickly. "It is far too dangerous. The lower levels are restricted. Only security personnel with special protection can go there." "What kind of protection?" Amy asked. "Mental shields," Veltar explained. "Devices that block telepathic attacks. Even with them, most guards can only stay near the creature for a few minutes." Jake looked thoughtful. "And it's been alone down there for how long?" 2 weeks since capture, Zixthal said. Why does that matter? On Earth, social animals get sick when they're isolated for too long, Jake explained. They stop eating, become aggressive, and sometimes die from loneliness. The aliens exchanged glances. Shadowmaws are not social, Veltar said. They are solitary hunters. Are you sure about that? Jake asked. Has anyone studied them in their natural habitat? There was a long pause. Finally, Zixthal spoke. The hunters who captured this one mentioned seeing others nearby. They had to kill several to get this one. You mean it had a family? Lisa asked. Pack, Veltar corrected. The hunters said there were 5 or 6 together, but that does not make them social. They were probably just competing for territory. Jake felt a sad feeling in his chest. The creature had lost its family and was now trapped alone in a metal cage. No wonder it was refusing to eat. I want to see it, he said again. Captain Morrison, Zixthal said seriously. I cannot allow that. The creature is too dangerous. Your death would cause problems with Earth's government. I'm not planning to die, Jake said with a small smile. I just want to look at it. From a safe distance, Amy put her hand on Jake's arm. Maybe we should listen to them, Captain. This isn't like dealing with Earth animals. All animals are the same in some ways, Jake said. They feel fear, pain, loneliness. They want to survive and be safe. If this creature is dying, maybe it needs something other than food. Like what? Danny asked. Understanding, Jake said simply. Veltar's yellow eyes narrowed. You're either very brave or very stupid, human. Probably both, Lisa said with a grin. Jake looked at the station administrator. What if I just observe from outside its cell? Through the viewing window? I won't go inside or try to interact with it. Zixthal's antennae twitched as he considered this. The viewing area is protected by strong barriers. And you would need mental shields. Then let me try, Jake said. If I can figure out why it's not eating, maybe we can help it. And if it drives you insane with its mental attacks? Veltar asked. Jake shrugged. Then you'll know not to let other humans near it. The 2 aliens talked quietly in their own language for a moment. Finally, Zixthal turned back to Jake. Very well, he said. But you must wear full protection and follow all safety rules. And if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. Agreed, Jake said. Veltar shook his head. This is a mistake. But humans are known for making mistakes and somehow surviving them. We prefer to call it learning, Danny said cheerfully. As they made plans to visit the lower levels, Jake wondered what they would find. He had a feeling this creature was more than just a mindless killer. Something in his gut told him there was a story behind its behavior, and he intended to find out what it was. The other aliens on the station watched them with a mixture of curiosity and concern as word spread that a human wanted to see the untamable beast. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others placed bets on how long Jake would last before running away in terror. But Jake wasn't thinking about fear or danger. He was thinking about a lonely creature that had lost everything and was slowly dying in a cage far from home. The elevator down to the lower levels moved slowly, giving Jake time to think. He wore a mental shield device on his head that looked like a silver headband. Veltar had explained that it would protect him from the worst of the creature's psychic attacks, but it wasn't perfect. Last chance to change your mind, Veltar said. The security chief stood beside Jake in the elevator, along with 2 other guards. Both guards looked nervous. I'm good, Jake said calmly. The elevator stopped with a soft ding. The doors opened to reveal a long, dark corridor lined with containment cells. Most were empty, but Jake could see a few holding smaller creatures from various worlds. The air felt heavy and cold. The Shadowmaw is at the end, Veltar said, pointing down the corridor. Cell 7. It has the strongest barriers on the station. They walked slowly down the hallway. Jake noticed that the other animals in the cells seemed restless. A small blue creature with tentacles pressed itself against the far wall of its cell. A bird-like alien with 4 wings huddled in a corner. They can sense it, one of the guards whispered. All the animals are afraid of the Shadowmaw. As they got closer to Cell 7, Jake began to feel something. It started as a small pressure in his head like the beginning of a headache. The mental shield device was warm against his forehead. That's it starting, Veltar said quietly. The creature knows we're here. They reached the end of the corridor. Cell 7 had thick metal walls and a large viewing window made of some kind of super-strong transparent material. Through the window, Jake could see into a large room with bare metal walls and a few pieces of basic furniture. At first, he didn't see the creature. Then something moved in the shadows at the back of the cell. The shadow maw stepped into the light and Jake felt his breath catch. The creature was massive, easily 12 feet tall when it stood upright. Its body was covered in black scales that seemed to absorb light. Long, powerful arms ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Its head was shaped like a mix between a wolf and a dragon, with intelligent yellow eyes and rows of sharp teeth. But what struck Jake most was not its size or its weapons. It was the look in its eyes. The creature looked tired, sad, and very, very alone. The moment the shadow maw saw Jake through the window, it attacked. The psychic assault hit like a hammer. Even through the mental shield, Jake felt waves of terror washing over him. Images flashed through his mind. Darkness, death, blood, pain, endless fear. He saw himself being torn apart by claws, eaten alive, dying in horrible ways. The two guards immediately stepped back, their faces pale. One of them made a choking sound and had to lean against the wall. "We should go," Veltar said urgently. "It's too strong." But Jake didn't move. He stood at the window looking directly at the creature. The mental attacks continued, wave after wave of fear and death. Jake felt his hands shake and his heart race, but he didn't run. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He sat down on the floor in front of the window. "What are you doing?" Veltar demanded. "Getting comfortable," Jake said. His voice was steady despite the ongoing psychic assault. "This might take a while." The shadow maw seemed confused by Jake's reaction. The mental attacks paused for a moment, then started again, stronger than before. Jake winced but stayed sitting. "Hello there," he said quietly, talking to the creature through the window. "I know you can't understand my words, but maybe you can understand my tone." The creature tilted its massive head, studying Jake with those intelligent yellow eyes. "I'm Jake," he continued, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I know you're scared and angry. I know you're hurting. I can see it in your eyes." The psychic attacks came again, but this time Jake thought he sensed something different in them. Along with the fear and anger, there was something else. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. "You remind me of animals from my homeworld," Jake said, ignoring the continuing mental pressure. "We have creatures called bears. Big, strong, dangerous when threatened. But they're not evil. They're just trying to survive and protect themselves." Veltar and the guards watched in amazement as Jake continued talking to the creature. Other station personnel had arrived, drawn by reports of what was happening. Aliens of various species gathered in the corridor, whispering among themselves. "We also have wolves," Jake continued. "They live in packs, families. They take care of each other. When one is alone, it gets sad and sick." "Is that what's happening to you?" "Did you lose your family?" The shadow maw moved closer to the window. Jake could see details now that weren't visible from a distance. The creature had old scars on its body, probably from its capture. Its scales were dull instead of shiny, a sign of poor health. Most telling of all, its body language reminded Jake of a grieving dog he had once known. "You lost them, didn't you?" Jake said softly. "Your pack, your family. The hunters killed them to get to you." The mental attacks suddenly stopped. The shadow maw stared at Jake with an expression that looked almost shocked. "I thought so," Jake said. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that happened to you." For the first time since its capture, the shadow maw made a sound that wasn't a growl or a roar. It was a low, mournful noise that sounded like crying. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said quietly. "What you're doing should be impossible. No one has ever gotten it to stop attacking mentally." "It's not attacking right now," Jake pointed out. "It's listening." The creature sat down on its side of the window, mirroring Jake's position. Up close, Jake could see that its yellow eyes were actually quite expressive. Right now, they looked sad and tired. "You don't want to hurt anyone," Jake said. "You're just scared and alone. You miss your family and you don't understand where you are or why you're here." The shadow maw made that crying sound again. Some of the watching aliens stepped back nervously, but Jake recognized it for what it was: grief. On Earth, when animals lose their families, they sometimes stop eating. Jake explained. It's not because they want to die. It's because they're so sad they can't think about anything else. "Is that what's happening to you?" The creature's head drooped, and Jake was certain he was right. "Food doesn't matter when your heart is broken," Jake said. "I understand that. Humans feel the same way sometimes." Dr. Kretal, the station's xenobiologist, pushed through the crowd of observers. She was a tall, thin alien with blue skin and large black eyes. "This is remarkable," she said quietly. I've studied the behavioral reports from Xerion Prime. Shadow Maws were observed in groups, but we assumed they were competing for territory, not cooperating. They're pack hunters, Jake said, still looking at the creature. Social animals. That's why isolation is killing this one. But how did you know? Dr. Cretal asked. Jake shrugged. Body language is universal. Grief looks the same whether you're human, dog, or shadow maw. The creature suddenly pressed one massive clawed hand against the window. Jake slowly raised his own hand and placed it against the glass, matching the creature's gesture. I know you can't understand all my words, Jake said, but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. I see you. I understand your pain. The Shadow Maw's eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, they seemed different. Less wild, less desperate. Still sad, but with a tiny spark of hope. Incredible, Dr. Cretal whispered. It's responding to emotional communication rather than verbal or visual cues. Animals are good at reading emotions, Jake said. Especially intelligent ones like this. It knows I'm not here to hurt it. The creature made a different sound now, still low, but not as mournful. It sounded almost like a question. I know, Jake said softly. You want to know if I really understand or if I'm just another alien who sees you as a monster. Jake stood up slowly, keeping his hand on the window. The Shadow Maw tracked his movement but didn't show any aggression. I'm going to come back tomorrow, Jake announced. Same time. We'll talk more then. As he turned to leave, the creature made an urgent sound and pressed both hands against the window. Jake turned back and saw something that made his heart ache. The Shadow Maw's expression was desperate, pleading. It didn't want him to go. I'll be back, Jake promised. I won't abandon you. The creature seemed to understand something in his tone, if not his words. It slowly moved its hands away from the window and settled back into a sitting position. As they rode the elevator back up, Veltar shook his head in disbelief. In all my years of security work, he said, I have never seen anything like that. The creature actually seemed to trust you. Trust has to start somewhere, Jake said, usually with someone willing to take the first step. Jake returned to the lower levels the next day, carrying a small bag with him. Word had spread throughout Kepler Station about his encounter with the Shadow Maw, and a larger crowd of aliens had gathered to watch. Some came out of curiosity, others to place bets on whether the human would survive another meeting. What's in the bag? Veltar asked as they descended in the elevator. Food, Jake said simply. Not for the creature, for me. I'm planning to stay longer today. Dr. Cretal joined them again, along with several other scientists who wanted to observe this unusual interaction. Jake noticed that the mental shield felt lighter on his head today, as if the device didn't need to work as hard. When they reached Cell 7, Jake saw that the Shadow Maw was already waiting by the window. The creature's posture was different from yesterday, less aggressive, more alert. Its yellow eyes tracked Jake's movements as he approached. Hello again, Jake said, settling into his spot on the floor. I told you I'd come back. The Shadow Maw made a low rumbling sound that almost sounded like a greeting. There was no mental attack this time, just a gentle pressure that felt more like curiosity than aggression. I brought lunch, Jake said, opening his bag and pulling out a sandwich. Human food. Probably nothing like what you eat, but I thought you might like to see it. The creature watched with interest as Jake unwrapped his sandwich and took a bite. Its nose twitched, and Jake realized it was smelling the food through the air circulation system. Turkey and cheese, Jake explained. From earthbirds and milk. We humans eat a lot of different things. What do you normally eat on your world? Dr. Cretal spoke up from behind him. According to our research, Shadow Maws are carnivores. They hunt large prey animals on Xerion Prime, usually in coordinated pack attacks. Pack attacks, Jake repeated, looking at the creature. So you work together with your family to hunt. That takes intelligence and communication. The Shadow Maw's eyes seemed to brighten at the word family. It made a series of low sounds that had a musical quality to them. Are you trying to tell me about your pack? Jake asked. The creature nodded. Actually nodded like it understood the question. The watching aliens murmured in surprise. It's displaying human-like communication behaviors, Dr. Cretal whispered. This suggests much higher intelligence than we previously estimated. Jake finished his sandwich and pulled out a small device from his bag. It was a music player from Earth. I thought you might like to hear something from my world, he said, activating the device. Soft classical music began playing from the speaker. The effect on the Shadow Maw was immediate. Its entire body relaxed and it moved closer to the window. The creature closed its eyes and listened with what could only be described as enjoyment. It appreciates music, Jake observed, another sign of intelligence and emotional complexity. As the music played, Jake began talking about Earth. He described forests and mountains, oceans and deserts. He talked about the animals that lived there, from tiny insects to massive whales. The Shadowmaw listened to every word, occasionally making sounds that seemed like questions or comments. "We learned to live with dangerous animals on Earth," Jake said. "It took time and understanding, but we figured out how to coexist. Bears, wolves, big cats, they're all predators, but they're not evil. They're just trying to survive." The creature made a sound that Jake was beginning to recognize as agreement. "I think your people misunderstood you," Jake continued. "They saw your size and your weapons and your mental abilities, and they decided you were just a killing machine. But you're not, are you? You're intelligent. You have feelings. You form bonds with others." The Shadowmaw pressed its hand against the window again. This time Jake noticed something different. The creature's claws were retracted and its touch was gentle. It wasn't trying to break through the barrier. It was trying to connect. Jake placed his hand against the glass, matching the gesture. For a moment he felt something strange. A faint mental touch, not aggressive or frightening, but curious and sad. The creature was trying to communicate with him telepathically, but gently this time. Images flashed through Jake's mind, but these weren't visions of death and terror. They were memories. He saw Xerion Prime as the Shadowmaw remembered it, a harsh but beautiful world of black stone and silver forests. He saw other Shadowmaws, smaller ones that must have been the creature's family. He felt the joy of successful hunts, the warmth of sleeping surrounded by packmates, the security of belonging somewhere. Then came the painful memories. Hunters with weapons and traps, the death of the pack members as they tried to protect each other, the terror and confusion of capture, the long, lonely journey to Kepler Station. Jake felt tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "No one should have to go through that." The creature pulled its hand back and made that mournful crying sound again. But this time Jake thought he heard something else in it. Relief, maybe. The relief of finally being understood. "Captain Morrison," Dr. Creetall said quietly, "what you're experiencing is unprecedented. Shadowmaws have never shown this level of cooperative telepathic communication with other species. Maybe no one ever gave them a chance," Jake said. "Maybe everyone was too busy being afraid to try understanding." He looked back at the creature. "You're not just smart, are you? You're lonely. That's why you stopped eating. It's not just grief, it's depression. You don't see a point in surviving without your family." The Shadowmaw's nod was unmistakable this time. Jake thought for a moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "What if you could have a new family?" he asked. "Not the same as what you lost, but people who care about you and understand you. Would that help?" The creature tilted its massive head, confused. "I mean it," Jake said. "My crew and I were like a pack. We take care of each other. We work together. We're not the same species as you, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe family is about more than biology." Veltar stepped forward. "Captain Morrison, you cannot be suggesting what I think you're suggesting." "Why not?" Jake asked, standing up. "This creature is intelligent, capable of emotional bonds, and clearly not the mindless killer everyone thinks it is. If it were willing to join my crew, why shouldn't it? Because it's a dangerous predator from a death world," Veltar said firmly. "So are humans from some perspectives," Jake pointed out. "We're predators too. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We form packs, we hunt together, we protect our own. Maybe that's why I can understand this creature. We're not so different." The Shadowmaw was listening to this conversation intently. It seemed to understand that they were talking about its future. Dr. Creetall looked fascinated. From a scientific standpoint, this could provide unprecedented opportunities to study Shadowmaw intelligence and social behavior. From a practical standpoint, it's insane, Veltar countered. Jake looked at the creature. "What do you think? Would you be willing to try, to give life another chance?" The Shadowmaw was quiet for a long moment. Then it stood up to its full height and placed both hands against the window. Its eyes met Jake's, and in that gaze, Jake saw something that hadn't been there before. Hope. The creature made a sound unlike any of the others. It was complex, musical, and somehow conveying multiple emotions at once. Agreement, gratitude, determination, and something that might have been the Shadowmaw equivalent of a promise. "I think that's a yes," Jake said softly. The crowd of watching aliens erupted in excited chatter. Some seemed amazed, others worried, but all were impressed by what they had witnessed. This will require extensive paperwork, Zixthal said, having arrived during the conversation, and safety protocols, and psychological evaluations. For both of you. Whatever it takes, Jake said. This creature deserves a chance at a real life, not slow death in a cage. As they prepared to leave, Jake made one more promise to the Shadow Maw. I'm going to work on getting you out of here, he said. It might take time, but I won't give up. You're not alone anymore. The creature settled back down, but its posture was different now, alert, hopeful, ready. For the first time since its capture, the Shadow Maw looked like it believed it had a future worth fighting for. And for the first time, Jake felt like he was about to gain not just a crew member, but a true friend. 3 days later, Jake stood outside Cell 7 with a keycard in his hand. After extensive negotiations, safety briefings, and more paperwork than he had ever seen in his life, the station authorities had agreed to let him enter the containment cell. The decision had not been easy, and it came with strict conditions. Are you absolutely certain about this? Veltar asked for the 10th time. Once that door opens, there will be no barrier between you and a creature that could kill you instantly. I'm sure, Jake said calmly. He looked through the window at the Shadow Maw, who was sitting quietly in the center of the cell. The creature had been watching the preparations with obvious interest. Dr. Kretal checked her instruments one more time. All monitoring systems are active. We'll be tracking your vital signs, the creature's behavior patterns, and any telepathic activity. Amy Walsh, Jake's medic, stood nearby with a medical kit and a worried expression. Captain, if anything goes wrong in there, I might not be able to help you in time. I know the risks, Jake said. But this creature has been alone in a cage for weeks. If we're going to build trust, I need to show that I'm willing to be vulnerable too. Lisa Crawford shook her head. Jake, I've seen you do crazy things before, but this might be the craziest. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Jake said with a small smile. Danny Rodriguez was less worried. If anyone can make friends with an alien monster, it's you, Captain. You once talked a angry space pirate into giving us directions instead of shooting us. That pirate wasn't 12 feet tall with claws, Amy pointed out. Jake looked at his crew. If something goes wrong, don't try to rescue me. Seal the cell and get out of here. Promise me. Not a chance, Lisa said firmly. We're a crew. We stick together. That's exactly why you need to promise, Jake said. I won't risk all of you for my decision. Before they could argue further, Jake swiped the keycard. The heavy door to Cell 7 began to slide open with a low mechanical hum. The Shadow Maw's head turned toward the opening door, but it didn't move from its sitting position. Jake could feel the creature's mental presence, but it was calm. Curious rather than aggressive. Jake stepped into the cell. The door closed behind him with a final sounding thud. The cell was larger than it had looked from outside, but it still felt small for a creature of the Shadow Maw's size. The walls were bare metal, and the only furniture was a sleeping platform and water dispenser. It was a prison, not a home. Jake and the Shadow Maw looked at each other across the empty space. The creature was even more impressive up close. Its black scales had an almost mirror-like quality, and its yellow eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. Hello, Jake said quietly. I'm actually here this time. The Shadow Maw made a low sound that Jake had come to recognize as a greeting. Slowly, carefully, the creature stood up to its full height. Jake felt very small by comparison, but he wasn't afraid. I know you're big enough to hurt me, Jake said, but I don't think you want to. I think you're tired of hurting people. The creature took a step closer, then stopped. It was giving Jake space, showing that it understood the concept of non-threatening behavior. Jake sat down on the floor, cross-legged. I brought something for you, he said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. It's not much, but I thought you might like it. He unwrapped the package to reveal a piece of meat from the station's food processors. It was synthetic, but it smelled like real protein. The Shadow Maw's nostrils flared as it caught the scent. For the first time in days, it looked interested in food. I had them prepare it without any sedatives or drugs, Jake said. Just nutrition. You need to eat if you're going to get strong enough to leave this place. The creature moved closer, stopping just outside of arm's reach. Up close, Jake could see that it was indeed suffering from malnutrition. Its scales were dull and its movements were slower than they should have been. Jake placed the meat on the floor between them and slid it toward the shadow maw. The creature looked at the food, then at Jake, then back at the food. "It's okay," Jake said. "I'm not trying to trick you. You're hungry, and this will help." The shadow maw carefully picked up the meat with one clawed hand. It sniffed it thoroughly, then took a small bite. Its eyes widened slightly, and it quickly finished the rest. "Good," Jake said. "You need to keep eating. Your body needs fuel to heal." The creature settled down into a sitting position facing Jake. They were now close enough that Jake could have reached out and touched its scales, but he kept his hands in his lap. "I've been learning about your world," Jake said. "Zerion Prime. Dr. Kretel showed me some research data. It looks like a hard place to live, but beautiful in its own way." The shadow maw's expression grew wistful. It began making a series of low musical sounds that were definitely some form of communication. "I wish I could understand your language," Jake said, "but maybe we don't need words for everything." The creature seemed to consider this, then slowly extended one hand toward Jake. Its claws were retracted, and its movement was careful and deliberate. Jake understood the gesture. Slowly, he reached out and placed his hand against the creature's palm. The shadow maw's skin was warm and surprisingly smooth despite the scales. The moment their skin made contact, Jake felt the creature's telepathic presence more clearly than ever before. But instead of fear or aggression, he sensed something else. Gratitude. Images flowed between them. Jake saw more memories of Zerion Prime, but these were different from the violent ones he had experienced before. He saw shadow maws caring for their young, teaching them to hunt, playing together in the silver forests of their world. He felt the deep emotional bonds that held their packs together. In return, Jake tried to project his own memories. Images of Earth, of his crew, of the sense of belonging that came from being part of a team. He shared his understanding of loyalty, friendship, and the hope for a better future. The shadow maw's eyes grew wide as it processed these new concepts. Then incredibly it smiled. The expression looked strange on its predatory features, but it was unmistakably a smile. "You understand?" Jake said softly. "We're not so different after all." The creature nodded and made a sound that seemed like agreement. Then it did something that surprised everyone watching from outside the cell. It began to purr. The sound was deep and rumbling, like a massive cat expressing contentment. The shadow maw's entire body relaxed and it leaned slightly toward Jake. "Well, I'll be damned." Danny's voice came through the communication system. "It's actually happy," Dr. Kretel's voice followed. "This is extraordinary. We're recording behaviors that have never been documented in shadow maw species." Jake smiled and kept his hand in contact with the creature. "What should I call you?" "You need a name if you're going to join my crew." The shadow maw tilted its head, considering. Then it made a specific sound, a flowing series of tones that was clearly its own name in its language. "That's beautiful," Jake said, "but I can't pronounce it properly. How about shadow?" "It's close and it fits." The creature tested the word, repeating it back in its deep voice. "Shadow." The pronunciation was careful but clear. "Shadow it is," Jake said. "Welcome to the crew, Shadow." Shadow made a sound that was definitely pleased. Then it settled down completely, lying on its side with its head near Jake. It was a position of complete trust, leaving itself vulnerable, but showing that it felt safe. Jake leaned back against Shadow's warm flank. The creature's purring continued, a soothing vibration that seemed to fill the entire cell. "This is impossible," Veltar's voice came through the speakers. "A shadow maw allowing physical contact with another species. Showing affection. It goes against everything we know about them." "Maybe what we knew was wrong," Jake said. "Maybe they're not the monsters we thought they were." Amy's voice was amazed. "Captain, your heart rate and stress levels are actually lower than normal. Being near that creature is relaxing you." "Shadow's not a creature," Jake corrected gently. "Shadow's a person. Just not a human person." Shadow's purring grew louder at Jake's words. The creature understood more than anyone had realized. "We're going to need a bigger ship," Lisa said, and Jake could hear the smile in her voice. Jake laughed. "We'll figure it out. We always do." As they sat together in the cell, human and shadow maw, Jake felt something he hadn't expected. He felt complete. His crew had always been like family to him, but now that family was growing in a way he had never imagined. Shadow's telepathic presence was warm and peaceful, no longer projecting fear but sharing a sense of belonging. For the first time since its capture, the great creature felt hope for the future. and for the first time in his life, Jake understood what it meant to bridge the gap between species through nothing more than compassion and understanding. "Tomorrow we start working on getting you out of here permanently," Jake promised. "You're going to see the stars again, Shadow. We're going to explore the galaxy together." Shadow's purring grew even louder, and Jake could feel the creature's joy through their telepathic connection. The Shadow Maw had found a new pack, and this time nobody was going to take it away. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the cargo bay of Liberty's Dream, watching as station workers made final modifications to accommodate their new crew member. They had installed stronger support beams, added a larger sleeping area, and created special environmental controls to keep the temperature comfortable for a creature from a much warmer world. Shadow watched the work with obvious interest. The Shadow Maw had been officially released into Jake's custody 3 days ago, after extensive legal paperwork and multiple psychological evaluations. Both Jake and Shadow had passed all tests, though some of the evaluators still seemed amazed by their bond. "I still can't believe they let you take it," Veltar said, standing nearby. The security chief had grown less hostile toward Shadow over the past weeks, especially after seeing how gentle the creature could be. "His name is Shadow," Jake corrected patiently. "And he's not an it. He's a member of my crew now." Shadow made a pleased rumbling sound at Jake's words. The creature had learned to understand basic human speech remarkably quickly, though he still communicated primarily through telepathy and body language. Lisa emerged from the ship's bridge, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Environmental systems are all set. The air mixture should be comfortable for everyone. We've also added extra padding to the corridors so Shadow doesn't bump his head on the low ceilings." "Thank you," Jake said. He looked at Shadow. "Ready to see your new home?" Shadow nodded enthusiastically. Over the past 2 weeks, Jake had spent several hours each day in the cell with Shadow, gradually introducing him to the other crew members and basic ship procedures. The creature was a fast learner with an excellent memory. They walked up the loading ramp together. Shadow had to duck slightly to fit through the entrance, but once inside, he looked around with obvious curiosity and excitement. Danny came out of the engine room, grinning. "Hey there, Shadow. Welcome aboard." Shadow made a friendly greeting sound and carefully offered Danny one clawed hand. The engineer shook it without hesitation, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "Your sleeping area is this way," Amy said, leading them down the corridor. She had been the most nervous about having Shadow aboard, but she had gradually warmed up to him after seeing how gentle he could be. Shadow's quarters were in what had previously been a large storage compartment. They had added soft padding to the walls and floor, installed proper lighting, and even included a small entertainment system with music from various worlds. "We downloaded some nature sounds from different planets," Amy explained. "We thought you might like to hear recordings from forests and oceans while you sleep." Shadow explored his new room carefully, testing the softness of the padding and examining all the equipment. When he heard the gentle sound of alien rainfall coming from the speakers, his eyes closed in obvious pleasure. "I think he likes it," Jake said with a smile. "Shadow, happy," Shadow said in his deep, careful voice. His English was still limited, but he was learning new words every day. "We're happy too," Lisa said. "It'll be good to have someone aboard who can handle heavy lifting without mechanical assistance." Shadow's strength was indeed impressive. During his time on the station, he had accidentally demonstrated his power when he casually moved a piece of equipment that normally required 2 aliens and an anti-grav unit to lift. "Speaking of which," Danny said, "we've got a cargo run to the Altair system. Perfect shakedown cruise for our new crew configuration." Jake nodded. "When do we leave?" "Soon as you're ready, Captain," Lisa said. "All systems are green." "Then let's get going," Jake said. "Shadow, would you like to see the bridge?" Shadow's excitement was obvious. He followed Jake through the ship, carefully ducking through doorways and making sure his claws didn't scratch the walls. When they reached the bridge, he stopped and stared in wonder at the viewport showing the stars beyond. "Big," Shadow said softly. "So big. That's space," Jake explained. "All those lights are stars, and many of them have planets with different kinds of life. We travel between them carrying cargo and seeing new things." Shadow pressed his face against the viewport, his yellow eyes reflecting the starlight. Through their telepathic connection, Jake could feel the creature's sense of awe and wonder. "We'll show you many different worlds," Jake promised. Some will be like your home, others completely different. You'll see things that even we haven't seen before. Shadow turned to look at Jake, his expression serious. In careful, slow words, he said, Jake, give Shadow. New life, Shadow, protect, Jake Pack. The simple statement carried enormous emotional weight. Shadow was making a formal pledge, offering his loyalty and protection to his new family. And we'll protect you too, Jake said. That's what families do. Lisa began the departure sequence and the ship gently lifted off from Kepler Station. Shadow watched in fascination as the station grew smaller and the stars grew brighter. Beginning jump to hyperspace in 30 seconds, Lisa announced. You might want to hold on to something, Jake warned Shadow. The first jump can be disorienting. Shadow gripped a specially installed handrail as the ship made the transition to faster-than-light travel. The stars outside stretched into lines of light, then vanished into the swirling tunnel of hyperspace. Shadow made a sound of pure amazement. Through their connection, Jake felt the creature's excitement and joy at experiencing something completely new. Welcome to galactic travel, Danny said cheerfully. Next stop, Altair 4. Over the following days, Shadow proved to be an excellent crew member. His strength was useful for moving heavy cargo. His enhanced senses could detect problems with ship systems before instruments registered them, and his telepathic abilities allowed him to communicate silently with Jake during potentially dangerous situations. More importantly, Shadow brought a sense of completeness to the crew that Jake hadn't realized was missing. The creature's loyalty was absolute. His curiosity was infectious, and his gentle nature belied his fearsome appearance. When they reached Altair 4, the docking authorities were initially alarmed by reports of a shadow maw aboard a human vessel. But Jake's reputation as a reliable captain, combined with official documentation of Shadow's status as a crew member, eventually convinced them to allow docking. Just keep that thing under control, the port administrator warned. His name is Shadow, and he's better behaved than most of your dock workers, Jake replied coolly. Their first cargo delivery went smoothly. Shadow stayed aboard the ship as planned, but word quickly spread about the human crew with a tame shadow maw. By the time they were ready to leave, a small crowd had gathered to catch a glimpse of the legendary creature. You're becoming famous, Jake told Shadow as they prepared for departure. Fame. Good? Shadow asked uncertainly. In this case, yes, Jake said. People will remember us, and that's good for business. Plus, you're changing how people think about your species. That's important. Shadow nodded thoughtfully. Shadow. Ambassador, he said, carefully pronouncing the new word Jake had taught him. Exactly. You're showing the galaxy that shadow maws aren't monsters. You're intelligent, caring people who deserve respect. As they traveled to their next destination, Jake noticed that Shadow seemed more confident and purposeful than before. The creature was beginning to understand his role not just as a crew member, but as a representative of his entire species. Captain, Amy said one evening as they sat in the common area, I have to admit, when you first suggested bringing Shadow aboard, I thought you were crazy. And now? Jake asked. Amy smiled and looked at Shadow, who was contentedly listening to music from Earth while practicing his English pronunciation. Now I can't imagine the crew without him, she said. He's family. Shadow's hearing was excellent. He looked up at Amy's words and smiled his strange but genuine smile. Amy, family, he said warmly. Shadow, happy family. Jake leaned back in his chair and looked around at his crew. Lisa was updating their navigation charts. Danny was reading a technical manual. Amy was organizing her medical supplies, and Shadow was peacefully learning new human words. They were an unlikely group, 4 humans from Earth and a massive predator from a death world. But they worked together, cared for each other, and trusted each other completely. You know what? Jake said. I think this is going to work out just fine. Shadow's purring filled the common area, a sound that had become as familiar and comforting as the ship's engine humming. Outside the viewport, the stars beckoned with the promise of new adventures, new worlds, and new opportunities to show the galaxy that friendship could transcend any barrier. The human crew and their Shadow Maw family member were ready for whatever came next. 6 months later, Liberty's Dream approached the mining station Omega-7 in the Vega system. Word of their unique crew had spread throughout the galaxy, and they now had a reputation as the ship with the tame Shadow Maw. Jake found the word tame annoying, but Shadow seemed to find it amusing. Another mining station, Lisa said as she guided the ship toward the docking bay. These places all look the same. Shadow stood at the bridge viewport watching the station grow larger. His English had improved dramatically over the months, and he now spoke in complete sentences, though his voice remained deep and careful. Station looks nervous, Shadow observed. Many ships leaving quickly. Jake looked more closely at the station. Shadow was right. Several vessels were departing in what looked like a hurry, and the normal traffic patterns seemed disrupted. Omega-7 Control. This is Captain Morrison of the Liberty's Dream requesting docking clearance, Jake said into the communication system. Liberty's Dream. This is Omega-7 Control, came the reply. The voice sounded stressed. We show you have a Shadow Maw aboard. Is that correct? Affirmative. Shadow is a crew member with full documentation. There was a pause. Captain Morrison, we have a situation here. We might need your help. Can you meet with Station Commander Reeve immediately upon docking? Jake and his crew exchanged glances. What kind of situation? We'd rather discuss it in person. Bay 7 is cleared for your arrival. As they docked, Jake noticed the station's security was much heavier than usual. Armed guards were positioned at regular intervals and everyone looked tense. Something's wrong here, Amy said quietly. Shadow, can you sense anything unusual? Jake asked. Shadow closed his eyes and extended his telepathic senses. After a moment, he opened them with a troubled expression. Fear, he said. Much fear. And anger. Something dangerous here. They were met at the airlock by Station Commander Reeve, a tired-looking human woman with graying hair and worry lines around her eyes. Captain Morrison, she said, shaking his hand. Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual, but we desperately need your help. What's the problem? Jake asked. Commander Reeve looked at Shadow uncertainly. Is it safe to talk in front of him? His name is Shadow, and yes, it's safe, Jake said firmly. He's part of my crew. We don't keep secrets from each other. Very well. Reeve led them through the station corridors. 3 days ago, we received a shipment of exotic animals for transport to various zoos and private collectors. One of the creatures escaped from its containment unit. What kind of creature? Danny asked. A Vexkai from the Rigel system, Reeve said. It's a shapeshifter with aggressive territorial instincts. Highly intelligent but completely hostile to other life forms. Shadow's expression grew serious. Vexkai very dangerous. Shadow, no stories. You know about them? Reeve asked. Stories from other worlds. Vexkai kill everything in territory. Cannot be reasoned with. Cannot be stopped easily. Reeve nodded grimly. It's been moving through the station's ventilation system, changing its shape to avoid detection. So far it's killed 6 people and injured dozens more. We can't use weapons without risking damage to critical systems. Where is it now? Lisa asked. We're not sure. It could be anywhere, looking like anything. A maintenance tool, a piece of furniture, even another person. We've had to evacuate most civilians, but essential personnel are trapped here. Jake understood why they had called for his help. You want Shadow to track it? Shadow Maws are among the few species with senses acute enough to detect shapeshifters, Reeve explained. And your companion has a reputation for being unusually cooperative. Shadow looked at Jake. Is dangerous. Vexkai will try to kill Shadow. We'll try to kill Jake Pack. We don't have to do this, Jake said. It's not our responsibility. Shadow was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. People dying. Shadow can help. Must help, Amy looked concerned. Shadow, these Vexkai things sound extremely dangerous. Very dangerous, Shadow agreed. But Shadow is dangerous too. And Shadow has Pack to help. Jake felt a surge of pride in his friend. Despite the risk, Shadow was willing to help save lives. What do you need from us? Jake asked Commander Reeve. If Shadow can track the creature and locate its position, our security teams can use containment fields to capture it without lethal force. And if the containment fails? Lisa asked. Reeve's expression was grim. Then we'll have to destroy it regardless of the damage to the station. Shadow studied the station's layout on a wall display. Vexkai like dark places, warm places, near power sources. He pointed to several locations. These areas most likely. Those are our main power distribution centers, Reeve said. If it damages those systems, we'll lose life support. Then we better find it quickly, Jake said. Shadow, are you sure about this? Shadow, sure. Pack protects people. This is what Pack does. They spent an hour planning their approach. Shadow would use his enhanced senses to track the Vexkai while the crew provided support. Station security would follow at a distance with containment equipment. One more thing, Reeves said as they prepared to begin. The Vex-Kai has been studying us. It's learning our behaviors, our weaknesses. It might try to imitate one of you to get close. How will we know if it's shapeshifted into one of us? Danny asked. Shadow tapped his head. Vex-Kai cannot copy mind. Shadow will know. They began their search in the lower levels where the power systems were located. Shadow led the way. His senses extended to their maximum range. The station corridors were dimly lit and eerily quiet. Something here, Shadow said quietly, stopping near a junction box. Smell wrong. Feel wrong. The junction box looked perfectly normal, but Shadow approached it carefully. Suddenly, the box exploded outward, revealing a creature like nothing Jake had ever seen. The Vex-Kai was roughly humanoid but constantly shifting, its flesh flowing like liquid. One moment it had claws, the next tentacles, then blade-like appendages. The creature let out a shriek of rage and launched itself at Shadow. The Shadow Maw was ready. He caught the attacking creature and threw it against the wall with tremendous force. "Containment field now!" Jake shouted into his communicator. The Vex-Kai bounced off the wall and immediately began shape-shifting again. This time it became something that looked almost exactly like Amy, except for the eyes, which remained completely black. "Don't be fooled," Shadow warned. "Not real Amy." The fake Amy spoke in Amy's voice. "Jake, help me. It's controlling my mind." For a moment, Jake hesitated. The imitation was nearly perfect. "Jake Pack is not Amy," Shadow said firmly. "Real Amy safe behind us." The real Amy spoke up from their position down the corridor. "That thing is definitely not me." The Vex-Kai realized its deception had failed. It abandoned the Amy form and became something new. A writhing mass of razor-sharp tentacles and snapping mouths. "Security teams, where's that containment field?" Jake demanded. "Working on it, Captain. The creature's interference is affecting our equipment." Shadow dodged a strike from one of the creature's tentacles and grabbed another. The two alien predators wrestled in the narrow corridor, both incredibly strong and dangerous. "Shadow, get clear," Lisa shouted. "Let security handle it." "Cannot," Shadow replied, his voice strained with effort. "If Shadow lets go, Vex-Kai will escape. We'll kill more people." The containment field finally activated, but the Vex-Kai was partially outside its range. The creature shrieked and tried to pull itself free while Shadow held it in place. "Field not strong enough," Shadow said. Shadow must hold it. The strain was enormous. Jake could see that Shadow was being injured by the creature's attacks, but the Shadow Maw refused to let go. "There has to be another way," Amy said. "Wait," Danny said, studying his scanner. "The creature's affecting local power systems. If we can overload the nearby conduits, we might be able to disrupt its shape-shifting ability." "Do it," Jake ordered. Danny worked quickly with his engineering tools. Sparks began flying from nearby power conduits as he deliberately caused a controlled overload. The effect on the Vex-Kai was immediate. Its shape-shifting ability faltered and it began reverting to its base form. More importantly, it weakened enough for the containment field to fully capture it. Shadow released the creature and staggered backward, breathing heavily. The Vex-Kai was now trapped in a shimmering energy cage, still writhing angrily but unable to escape. "Got it." Commander Reeves' voice came through the communicator. "Good work, everyone." Jake rushed to Shadow's side. The Shadow Maw had several cuts and burns from the fight, but he seemed proud of their success. "Shadow okay?" Jake asked. "Shadow okay. Pack okay. People safe." "This good." Amy immediately began treating Shadow's injuries while station medical teams arrived to help. "I've never seen anything like that," one of the security officers said. "A Shadow Maw and a human crew working together to save lives. It's unprecedented." "It's what families do," Jake said simply. As they returned to their ship, Commander Reeve thanked them personally. "The station is in your debt. That creature would have killed many more people if you hadn't stopped it." "Shadow stopped it," Jake corrected. "We just helped." Shadow looked pleased by the praise but also thoughtful. "Jake Pack," he said, "Shadow wants to help more people. More places need help with dangerous creatures. Are you suggesting we go into the monster hunting business?" Lisa asked with a grin. "Not hunting," Shadow said seriously. "Helping. Understanding. Like Jake helped Shadow." Jake smiled. Their reputation was already Sprayer had passed since Shadow joined the crew of Liberty's Dream, and their reputation as problem solvers had grown throughout the galaxy. They were no longer just cargo haulers, but had become specialists in dealing with dangerous alien creatures and interspecies conflicts. Their ship now carried specialized equipment for creature containment. communication devices for various alien languages, and medical supplies for treating both humans and exotic life forms. Jake stood on the bridge, reading their latest mission briefing on a datapad. They had been contacted by the Galactic Research Institute about a situation on Kepler's Edge, a remote research station studying dangerous life forms from across the galaxy. "What's the problem this time?" Lisa asked from the pilot's seat. "Multiple problems," Jake said. "The research station has several creatures that have become unmanageable. The local staff can't handle them and they're requesting our help." Shadow looked up from where he was studying star charts. His English had become nearly perfect over the past year, and he now served as the ship's specialist in xenobiology and interspecies psychology. "What kinds of creatures?" Shadow asked. "Let's see," Jake read from the pad. "A thornback from Sigma Draconis that's refusing to eat and attacking anyone who approaches. A family of crystal spiders from the Andromeda system that have become hyper-aggressive after losing one of their young. And something called a nightmare crawler from the dark side of Proxima Centauri that's been giving off psychic screams that are driving the research staff insane." Danny whistled low. "Sounds like a fun vacation spot." "The station is isolated," Jake continued. 3 weeks' travel from the nearest major port. If we don't help them, they might have to destroy the creatures to protect their staff." Amy shook her head sadly. "These research stations often don't understand that these creatures have emotional needs, not just physical ones." "Shadow agrees," the Shadow Maw said. "Many aliens think dangerous creatures have no feelings, think they are just monsters. Shadow knows better. Over the past year, Shadow had helped them resolve dozens of similar situations. His ability to communicate telepathically with other creatures, combined with his understanding of trauma and isolation, had made him invaluable in their work." "How long until we reach Kepler's Edge?" Jake asked. 2 days at current speed," Lisa replied. "We should probably prepare for multiple challenging situations." They spent the journey researching the creatures they would be dealing with and planning their approach. Jake had learned that each species required different handling techniques, and rushing into a situation could make things worse rather than better. When they arrived at Kepler's Edge, they found a station in chaos. The facility was a collection of interconnected domes built on an asteroid, with specialized containment areas for dangerous life forms. Emergency lights were flashing and they could hear alarm sounds even through the vacuum of space. Dr. Helena Cross, the station director, met them at the airlock. She was a thin woman with tired eyes and stress lines that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank goodness you're here," she said. "The situation has gotten worse since we contacted you. The nightmare crawler's psychic screams are affecting everyone on the station. Half my staff are suffering from severe headaches and nightmares." "What about the other creatures?" Shadow asked. Dr. Cross looked surprised to hear the Shadow Maw speak, but she recovered quickly. "The thornback hasn't eaten in 10 days. We're afraid it's going to die, and the crystal spiders have become so aggressive that we can't even approach their habitat to provide food or medical care." "Show us the nightmare crawler first," Jake said. "If it's affecting your staff, we need to deal with that immediately." They followed Dr. Cross through the station corridors. Jake noticed that the human and alien staff members they passed looked exhausted and frightened. Some were holding their heads as if in pain. "The creature is in our highest security containment area," Dr. Cross explained. "We've had to abandon the entire section because the psychic effects are too strong." They reached a heavily reinforced door marked with warning signs in multiple languages. Through a small observation window, Jake could see into a darkened chamber. "I can't see anything," Lisa said, looking through the window. "Nightmare crawlers are creatures of pure darkness," Dr. Cross explained. "They evolved in places where no light exists. This one was captured from a cave system on the night side of Proxima Centauri." Shadow pressed his face to the window and extended his telepathic senses. Almost immediately, he jerked back with a pained expression. "Very hurt," Shadow said. "Very afraid. Creature thinks it is dying." "Dying?" Dr. Cross looked confused. "Our scans show it's physically healthy. Not body dying," Shadow explained. "Soul dying. Heart dying. Creature needs darkness to live, but not this darkness. Wrong kind of darkness," Jake understood. "It needs familiar darkness. Darkness from its home. How can darkness be different?" Dr. Cross asked. Amy spoke up. "On Earth, we've learned that environment includes more than just temperature and air. It includes sounds, smells, textures, even magnetic fields. This creature is homesick. Can you help it?" Dr. Cross asked hopefully. Shadow nodded. Shadow try. But Shadow needs to go inside with Creature. Absolutely not, Dr. Cross said quickly. The psychic screams will drive you insane. Shadow has strong mind, the Shadow Maw said confidently. And Shadow understands pain. Maybe Creature will listen to another who has been alone and afraid. Jake looked at his friend with concern. Shadow, are you sure? We don't know how powerful this creature's psychic abilities are. Shadow is sure. Creature needs help. Shadow helps creatures. After much discussion, they decided to let Shadow try. They equipped him with monitoring devices so they could track his vital signs, and they kept the containment field ready in case they needed to extract him quickly. Shadow entered the darkened chamber alone. Immediately, the psychic screaming intensified, and even through the reinforced walls, the observers could feel the waves of terror and despair. But Shadow didn't retreat. He sat down in the darkness and began to speak in his deep, calm voice. Shadow knows you are afraid, he said. Shadow knows you are lost and alone. Shadow was lost once too. The psychic screaming continued, but Shadow pressed on. Shadow was taken from family, put in cage, given wrong food, wrong light, wrong everything. Shadow wanted to die. Slowly, the psychic screaming began to diminish, but Shadow found new family that understood Shadow's pain, family that helped Shadow heal. Through the monitoring equipment, they could hear Shadow begin to purr, the deep rumbling sound that had become his signature expression of contentment. Shadow can help you too, but you must stop screaming. Screaming hurts other people and they are not your enemy. The psychic noise stopped completely. In the sudden silence, they could hear Shadow's voice more clearly. Shadow knows your darkness is wrong. Too quiet. Your home has sounds, yes? Sounds of cave, sounds of wind, sounds of life. From the chamber came a new sound, completely different from the psychic screaming. It was a low musical tone that seemed to pulse with longing. Yes, Shadow said gently. You miss home sounds. Shadow will help. Shadow began to make sounds of his own, using his telepathic abilities to project audio memories. Sounds of wind through rocks, water dripping in caves, the distant calls of creatures that lived in dark places. The nightmare crawler responded with more musical tones, and Jake realized they were having a conversation. After an hour, Shadow emerged from the chamber. The psychic screaming had stopped completely, and the station staff were already looking relieved as their headaches faded. Creature is lonely and homesick, Shadow reported. Needs sounds of home to feel safe. Also needs different food. What you give is right nutrition but wrong taste. Creature starving because food tastes wrong. Dr. Cross looked amazed. We never considered that taste preferences might be that important. Everything important to trapped Creature, Shadow said. Creature has no control over anything else in life. Food, sounds, smells become very important. They spent the next 2 days working with the other creatures on the station. The thornback, it turned out, was grieving for its mate, which had died during capture. Shadow helped it through a modified morning ritual, and it began eating again. The crystal spiders were protecting their territory because they believed their missing young might still return. Once Shadow helped them understand that their child was gone and showed them how to honor its memory, they became calm and cooperative. By the end of their visit, all 3 creatures were stable and healthy. More importantly, Dr. Cross and her staff had learned new approaches to caring for traumatized alien life forms. I can't thank you enough, Dr. Cross said as they prepared to leave. We've been studying these creatures for months, but we never understood their emotional needs. Most people don't, Jake said. They see dangerous aliens and forget that intelligence often comes with emotions. Shadow was lucky, the Shadow Maw added. Shadow found understanding family. These creatures will be lucky too now that you understand them better. As they departed Kepler's Edge, Jake reflected on how much their lives had changed. What had started as a simple cargo run to Kepler Station had become a new career. 2 years after Shadow first joined the crew, Liberty's dream was approaching Earth. Jake stood on the bridge, watching his home planet grow larger in the viewport, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be Shadow's first visit to humanity's homeworld, and Jake wanted everything to go perfectly. Earth looks different than Shadow expected, the Shadow Maw said, pressing his face to the viewport. His English was now flawless, though he still spoke with careful precision. More blue, more green, very peaceful looking. It can be peaceful, Jake said, but it can also be dangerous. Earth made humans what we are, It taught us to survive, to adapt, and to work together. Shadow nodded thoughtfully. Like Xerion Prime made Shadowmaw strong. But Earth made humans something else, made humans understand. Their reputation had grown enormously over the past 2 years. They were now the galaxy's premier specialists in dealing with dangerous or misunderstood alien creatures. They had resolved conflicts on dozens of worlds, saved countless lives, and helped establish new protocols for interspecies animal management. But more importantly, they had changed how the galaxy viewed both humans and creatures like Shadow. Earth Control. This is Captain Morrison of the Liberty's Dream requesting landing clearance at New Geneva Spaceport, Jake said into the communicator. Liberty's Dream, this is Earth Control. We have you on approach. Please be advised that we have special clearance procedures for your Shadowmaw crew member. Jake frowned. What kind of special procedures? Nothing concerning, Captain. The World Wildlife Federation and the Interspecies Research Institute have requested to observe your arrival. Your crew has become quite famous. Lisa grinned from the pilot's seat. Famous? I like the sound of that. As long as they don't want to put Shadow in a cage for study, Amy said protectively. Shadow chuckled, a sound that had become familiar and comforting to the crew. No cage big enough for Shadow now. Shadow has family. As they landed at New Geneva Spaceport, Jake could see a crowd of people waiting near their landing pad. Scientists, reporters, and officials were all gathered to welcome them home. Ready for this? Jake asked Shadow. Shadow ready. Earth is Jake's home. Shadow wants to see where Jake family comes from. Dr. Elena Vasquez, director of the Interspecies Research Institute, was the first to greet them as they exited the ship. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an air of scientific curiosity. Captain Morrison, she said, shaking Jake's hand. Welcome home. Your work has been extraordinary. You've revolutionized our understanding of interspecies cooperation. Thank you, Jake said. But the real credit goes to Shadow. He's the one who showed us that understanding is possible. Dr. Vasquez turned to Shadow with obvious fascination. Mr. Shadow, it's an honor to meet you. Your species has been the subject of scientific study for decades, but you're the first Shadowmaw to demonstrate such advanced social integration. Shadow happy to meet Earth scientists, Shadow replied politely. Shadow learns much from humans. Maybe humans learn from Shadow too. I'm certain we will, Dr. Vasquez said. We'd like to invite you to speak at the Interspecies Conference next week. Researchers from across the galaxy will be attending. Shadow looked at Jake. Conference good idea? It's your choice, Jake said. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. Shadow wants to help. If Shadow speaks, maybe other creatures get better treatment. Shadow will speak. Over the next week, they toured Earth, showing Shadow the diversity of their homeworld. They visited forests where Shadow marveled at the variety of Earth wildlife. They went to cities where he observed human civilization. They even visited the ocean, where Shadow experienced swimming for the first time, and discovered he greatly enjoyed it. Earth has so many different environments, Shadow observed as they stood on a beach, watching the waves. Hot places, cold places, wet places, dry places, and humans live in all of them. That's what made us adaptable, Jake explained. We had to learn to survive anywhere, so we became good at figuring out new situations. Like figuring out how to help scared Shadowmaw, Shadow said with a smile. The Interspecies Conference was held in Geneva, with delegates from over 200 different worlds and species. Shadow was nervous as they prepared for his presentation, but the crew supported him completely. Just be yourself, Amy advised. Tell them your story. Remember, you're not just representing yourself, Danny added. You're speaking for every misunderstood creature in the galaxy. Shadow nodded seriously. Shadow understands. Shadow will do good. The conference hall was packed. Aliens of every conceivable shape and size filled the audience, along with human scientists and officials. Shadow walked to the podium with dignity, his massive frame moving gracefully despite his size. My name is Shadow, he began, his deep voice carrying clearly through the hall. 2 years ago, Shadow was dying in cage. Shadow was called Monster, Killer, Untamable Beast. Shadow believed these things about himself. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Then human named Jake Morrison sat outside Shadow's cage. Jake did not run when Shadow attacked with mind. Jake did not call Shadow monster. Jake called Shadow friend. Shadow continued his story, describing his journey from a traumatized, aggressive creature to a valued crew member and interspecies mediator. He spoke about the other creatures they had helped, and how understanding and patience could overcome even the most seemingly impossible situations. Shadow learned that dangerous does not mean evil, he said. Strong does not mean cruel. Different does not mean wrong. Shadow learned that family is not about same species. Family is about love, trust, understanding. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. Questions came from the audience, and Shadow answered each one thoughtfully and honestly. What would you say to someone who fears creatures like you? Asked a delegate from the Rigel system. Shadow would say, fear is natural, but fear can become understanding if you let it. Shadow was feared too, but Shadow found family who saw past fear to real Shadow underneath. Do you think other dangerous species could be integrated like you have been? Asked a human researcher. Shadow thinks every intelligent being wants same things. Want to be safe, want to be understood, want to belong somewhere. If you give creature these things, creature will surprise you with kindness. After the conference, Dr. Vasquez approached them with a proposal. The Galactic Council has approved funding for a new initiative, she said. The Interspecies Understanding Project. We want to create teams like yours, trained in the methods you've developed. Would you be willing to help train them? Jake looked at his crew. They had discussed this possibility during their time on Earth. We'd be honored, Jake said, but we want to keep working in the field too. There are still too many creatures out there who need help. Of course, Dr. Vasquez agreed. You'll work part-time as instructors and continue your missions. You'll also be given access to better resources and support. Shadow looked pleased. More people learning to help creatures. This is good. This is very good. As they prepared to leave Earth, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that first day at Kepler Station. They had started as a simple cargo crew and had become pioneers in interspecies relations. Earth visit successful? Shadow asked as they watched the planet shrink in their viewport. Very successful, Jake said. You impressed a lot of important people today. Shadow not trying to impress. Shadow just telling truth. That's what made it so impressive, Lisa said with a grin. Their next mission was already waiting for them. A research station in the Centauri system that had discovered a new species of highly intelligent but apparently hostile creatures. The local authorities wanted to destroy them before they became a threat, but the research team believed they could be communicated with. Sounds familiar? Danny said as he read the mission briefing. Every mission sounds familiar now, Amy observed. Fear, misunderstanding, the assumption that dangerous means evil. But we know better, Jake said. We know that with patience and understanding, even the most frightening situations can be resolved peacefully. Shadow was studying the data about the new species they would encounter. Creatures sound scared, not evil. Probably protecting territory, protecting young. Shadow thinks we can help. I'm sure we can, Jake said. We always do. As Liberty's Dream jumped to hyperspace, carrying its experienced crew toward another challenging mission, Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had found their true calling in the galaxy, and they were making a real difference. Shadow had grown from a traumatized, isolated creature into a confident leader and teacher. The crew had evolved from cargo haulers into the galaxy's premier specialists in interspecies understanding. And together they were proving that the universe was big enough for every kind of intelligence, no matter how strange or frightening it might appear. Their work was far from over. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species that needed advocates and understanding. But with each successful mission, they were changing attitudes and saving lives. They were building bridges between worlds and proving that compassion was the most powerful force in the universe. The stars ahead held the promise of new challenges, new friends, and new opportunities to show the galaxy that understanding could triumph over fear. And Jake knew that whatever they encountered, they would face it together as a